Some games evolved from their original genre into something totally different, like Fallout being an isometric tactical RPG and moving into a tactical first-person shooter, or Metal Gear Solid being a tactical espionage action game and turning into a card battle game on a handheld device. Remember Acid? Dynasty Warriors was once a fighting game before it turned into an operatic hack and slash. Sometimes these changes work, like Super Mario RPG being listed as one of the greatest video games of all time. Sometimes they are not well received, like XCOM's spin-off, The Bureau, XCOM Declassified. Final Fantasy Tactics is considered one of the best games in the franchise, and sold twice as many copies in 1997 as Final Fantasy XIV did in 2010. Sometimes games need a changeover to a new genre, either in the main franchise or as a spin-off to keep fresh. Even Call of Duty and Battlefield have evolved in some ways, besides moving away from World War II settings. Some genre shifts in a franchise go over poorly, but some go on to make millions for their publishers. Some are simply great ideas, like Overwatch 2 being a story-based PvE experience. And there are lots of games that could really benefit from genre shifts more than Command & Conquer actually being produced as an RTS again. I'm Kirsten from WhatCulture, and these are 10 video games that could sell millions as different genres. Number 10. Fallout Survival Horror. The general consensus about Fallout 76 brings the phrase "show" to mind. For a moment though, let's ignore the recurring bugs, game crashing, reused assets, overpriced cosmetics, mouldy helmets and not canvas bags. You still have the issue that long-time Fallout fans didn't get the narrative dream they were hoping for, and MMO fans didn't get the cooperative experience inside a post-apocalyptic setting they were hoping for. In the end, no one who wanted the game got what they were hoping for. But what if, instead of a bland, emotionless landscape of PvP loot grinding, Fallout 76 had instead been a survival horror game? Imagine if the story had instead been along the lines of a vault that's irradiated and infected raiders and scorched beasts made it into the vault. You play as one of the few survivors trying to reclaim it by clearing it out or escape a lost cause. If we're going to have a Fallout game with no human NPCs to interact with, why not make it a dark, scary romp through one of the control vaults that is falling apart, right? Armed with insufficient ammunition and a Pip-Boy, can you survive the vault? Number 9. Elder Scrolls Life Sim. If you take a trip through the Elder Scrolls tags of social media, a common story will begin to unfold, especially concerning Skyrim. People like to play the game, regardless of the plot. Stories abound of people just working to adopt children and pets and live out a nice life, regardless of the dragons who are massacring the world around them and the warring political factions. Half the mods you see for Skyrim are places to live, new ways to interact with the world, and other things that are absolutely not a hero's quest kind of situation. So why not just create a life sim set in the Elder Scrolls world? Instead of playing as a grand hero, you can play as No Name the Bastard, a street urchin born illegitimate to a noble clan, who must crawl his way from the dumpsters to owning a small farm on the southern side of Falkreath. Or maybe you want to play as Elaziria, daughter of a skooma merchant who wants to raise sheep outside of Castle Volkihar. Or perhaps you want to play as Hector the Iron-Eyed, a former adventurer who settled down as a town guard in Whiterun after being struck in the knee by a fire spell. Basically, imagine Harvest Moon / Stardew Valley meets Skyrim. The player can farm, become a peddler or a bounty hunter, a mercenary in the ongoing political struggles of Tamriel, etc. Skyrim's Hearthfire DLC has a 5 out of 10 rating and still sold well. Imagine that with beefier options. Number 8. Vampire the Masquerade, Coteries of Blood. Vampire Masquerade is a popular gaming franchise among several mediums, with 2004's Bloodlines being a bit of a high watermark for the digital gaming series. Bloodlines 2 is planned to be released in early 2020, exciting much of the fanbase. And if you can't wait for that, then very recently, Coteries of New York came out. For those unfamiliar with the franchise, or the Bloodlines titles in particular, you play as a vampire in a world where vampires are real but hide themselves away from humans. humans. They have a complex political spectrum that often degrades into petty disagreements and little more than gang-like turf war. In the Coteries of New York game, which is more like a visual novel than Bloodlines action RPG styling, you get a little group together and navigate one of those tense political issues. How great would it be to play a Vampire the Masquerade game as the leader of a vampire hive? You have your little coven of kindred, i.e. fellow vampires, and have to maintain relations with both the vampire world and the human world, with the party relations that seem to be the high point of Coteries of New York and the tense action-y aspects of Bloodlines combined into one game. It could sell enough to fund your own Camarilla. Number 7. For Honor, Empires. For Honor is a brutal game, full of beheadings, stabbings, eviscerations, and all kinds of ways to kill folks with medieval weaponry, assuming you grind or throw enough cash at Ubisoft to unlock said options. But one of the underplayed aspects of the game is the story that brings a host of renegades from each faction together, relatable, likeable characters who are terribly underused in the grand scheme of the narrative. How great would For Honor 2 be if the emphasis was on an evolving worldscape wherein you played as the renegade faction, trying to bring peace to the world, and you did it by playing as an action strategy title. Instead of just playing as a linear narrative, force the player to make strategic decisions on an overarching map, decide on where to attack, where to defend, and who to send for what task. Then onto the same solid, breathtaking, via beheading of course, gameplay you're familiar with. Something akin to the Empires expansions of the Dynasty Warrior series. Add in the incentive to have controlling different locations on the map and unlock different cosmetics or actions/executions, and it creates a reason to have multiple playthroughs, even without any multiplayer aspects. It could convince people who don't want a PvP experience to get the game. Ubisoft could even take a page from Blizzard and link it to the original game, with 2 being the single player experience and 1 being the multiplayer experience. Number 6, This War of Mine, the Refugee Saga. For those that have never had the misfortune of playing it, This War of Mine is a game about struggling to survive as a civilian in a war-torn, besieged city. It's tough, it's grueling, and for many, it is gut-wrenching in its narrative and mechanics. It essentially boils down into a resource management game. Keep enough food, medical supplies, and weapons around to keep your very own patch of hell functioning and everyone mostly alive. For people who aren't really into just watching a bunch of housemates gather firewood to melt snow, the setting could easily be moved to a refugee caravan, fleeing a war-torn nation. Imagine something like the Banner Saga, but without a combat mode. You must gather food and medical supplies like in the original, and get your little band of frightened civilians out of the war zone and into a neighbouring nation willing to take in refugees. 1 part Oregon Trail, 1 part Hellscape. Basically Spec Ops The Line, except you're one of the poor bastards hiding out in a shipping container while some nutjob drops white phosphorus on your entire family. Number 5, Tomb Raider, Phantom Odyssey. The latest game in the series, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, is largely considered, as Rachel Weber of Games Radar says, the strongest entry in the rebooted trilogy. It scored a 78 average between the 3 ports of Metacritic. Still no Red Dead Redemption 2 with its 96 average, but nobody expected anything like that. One of the most well-liked parts of Shadow was the diverse, less scripted scenarios within the game. After all, how many times can you climb an identical wall that crumbles when it turns pale brown before it gets more stale than month-old bread? So what if a Tomb Raider game took a page from Metal Gear Solid and just had a big open world with multiple locations? One of the things Metal Gear Solid 5 did right was the big open world to explore with set missions. Sure, the world itself could have used a little more life at times, but the system was sensible, especially when you add in the second location in Zaire to break up just roaming the same deserted landscape for 20 hours. Imagine a Lara Croft who works from a Croft Manor central hub and can explore missions and puzzle-laden temples in Central America, Northern Japan, the Levant, and Djibouti. Tired of exploring Aztec ruins? Fly to some Ainu ruins. Explore some Crusader dungeons or check in on Queen Hatshepsut's Puntian temple. Number 4, Tenchu, Origin Pain. The Tenchu series, which is about ninja operatives in medieval Japan serving a beneficent master, Lord Goda, hasn't seen a new entry since 2009. Similar to the Tomb Raider discussion, a new entry in the Tenchu series could take a page from Metal Gear Solid 5. Imagine Lord Goda's entire realm laid out on an open world, dotted with locations found throughout the series. Various missions could include story missions regarding a war between Goda and one of his neighbours, while also allowing the player to perform all manner of acts of sabotage against the enemy army and realm for minor missions, rescuing prisoners, harassing merchants, assassinating local landholders. You get the picture. An interesting facet to shake things up would be to allow the player to play as an independent faction, rather than a member of the Azuma Ninja clan. The player could represent a small band of non-affiliated shinobi, allowing the player to engage in missions against both the Goda clan and their enemies. Work too hard against one faction and you'll be targeted by their operatives for a raid against your home base, or become a wanted criminal in their realms, making missions there harder to achieve. Rather than explorable dungeons and tombs like a Tomb Raider game would have, a Tenchu game could have intricately designed castles and giant temples to explore, perfect for the ninja weebs of the gaming world. Number 3. The Witcher: New Blood. A major complaint of the Witcher series is that Geralt of Rivia is an uninspiring or even downright disliked main character. Though also regularly ranked as one of gaming's favourite protagonists, his womanising ways and dry wit aren't enjoyed by everybody. Likewise, there is a culture among gamers where they simply don't want to play a character, they want to play their character. So, a Witcher game where you get to play as a created character would tick a lot of boxes for a lot of people, me being one of them. Imagine designing your own Witcher, or even just playing as a person of the world, thrust into a role he or she is not prepared for, finding the corpse of a dead Witcher in the swamp and barely defending yourself from a graveir with their silver sword, only to become the village's hero and getting called on to thwart an evil plot from within the nearby castle town. Written with the same richness of CD Projekt Red's Witcher 3, but with a character the player is able to shape to the narrative, could bring a lot of new folks into the series. Number 2. Overwatch: World Recall. We've already mentioned that Overwatch is getting a sequel that is going to make it more PvE and more storyline based. As Ewan Patterson recently pointed out in another article, Overwatch was originally going to be an MMO called Titans. So how about an Overwatch MMO? Allow players to create a character with a slew of perks and abilities, design them in a character creator filled with wonderful Blizzard art assets, and then get unleashed onto the world. Play as lower ranking Overwatch heroes who are responding to the recall and working about the world to stop the second Omnic crisis. If the game moved away from first-person shooter controls, the game could potentially bring in a whole new slew of players, without stealing the fanbase already salivating for Overwatch 2. But even continuing with their solid FPS playstyle, the ability to live within the Overwatch world would be a welcome one to many gamers. Number 1. Rainbow Six: Rainbow Protocol. In the Rainbow Six series, the titular group is an elite team of international special forces operatives who participate in blacker-than-black operations. Generally, it has been a first-person shooter series, with Rainbow Six Siege being the latest entry. Imagine a tactical third-person shooter like a similar entry in the Armour series of games. You control a fire team of 4 operatives in battlefield situations, but you would also control the entire team of 10 operatives in a situation akin to XCOM, or the 2018 indie title Phantom Doctrine. Players would operate as the ranking officer of the Rainbow teams, or the Rainbow Director, and have to control recruitment, training, management, and assignments of the Rainbow team members. Give the various operatives personality quirks to navigate for some strategic options. Maybe your American demolitions expert was a huge freedom fries kind of guy and hates your French corpsman. Mitigate these issues by sending your diverse teams around the world based on how well they get along and how their skill sets match up. Ubisoft could even use the scrapped story from the game that eventually became Siege Patriots, or an entirely new story involving an international terrorist organisation that the player would have to bring down, quietly and strategically. And those were 10 video games that could sell millions as a different genre. Click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and check out some of our other gaming videos too. But for now, I've been Kirsten from WhatCulture, and I'm off to ask Hideo Kojima if I can be the new age Lara Croft.